The Wild Wild West.
Well, this is a big one.
Special edition.
It's a special edition. Normally we're goofing around.
Yeah,
I've never been more ashamed to let somebody into our studio. As soon as he came in, I was like a lady. I was like, "Well, sorry, it's so messy in here." We're here with Nick Bryant. He's the author of the Franklin Scandal and
Confessions of a Madam.
Yes, Confessions of a DC
Madam.
Madam.
Confessions of a DC Madam.
Madam.
The politics of sex, lies, and blackmail.
Yes.
Goddamn. Pull that mic
Nick,
over.
you speak a little more into the mic. So what you were just saying is how you got involved in the Franklin Scandal at the very beginning. So let's jump right in.
Yeah.
I was talking to an editor at Rolling Stone, and he said, "Pitch me dark stories." And I said, just kind of throwing my hands up in there. So, what do you want? Do you want a story on Nazis? Do you want a story on Satanists? I mean, what do you want? And he goes, Satanists. That sounds good. So I started this whole odyssey, this very dark odyssey. I was talking to Satanists, and they struck me as they didn't strike me as very ethical people.
Yeah.
Actually quite unctuous. And I felt like I had to wash my hands, after I hung out with them.
Yeah.
But anyway, and then I was trolling the internet looking for subject matter. I mean, when you're going to write something, you try to get as much information as you can and then distill it. And then I came across a cult called the Finders that had been busted by the U.S. Customs for trafficking children. They had 6 kids in Tallahassee, Arizona, and some concerned citizens called Tallahassee Police Department, and the Tallahassee Police Department arrested the 2 finders and put the 6 kids in protective custody.
Yeah.
And the 2 finders were arraigned on multiple counts of child abuse, multiple counts, and they were held at $100,000 bond. I think it might have even been higher. And then 2 of the kids, according to the Tallahassee police report that I got, 2 of the kids have been sexually abused. And then the U.S. Customs got involved with it because there was child pornography. And they got a search warrant for the warehouse where the Finders lived, and they found child pornography.
And the warehouse is in like D.C., right?
Yes, in Washington, D.C. And they found all kinds of really unsavory things. And actually, the Finders had been connected to a murder, too. And all of a sudden, the CIA came in and quashed the entire case. And those 2 finders were just let out of jail, and those kids were repatriated with the cult. And I thought to myself, I kind of thought I knew how the world worked. But after I read that document, it just blew my mind. I mean, what have I missed as far as my understanding of the world? How is this even possible that the CIA goes to bat for some very strange people that are treating children nefariously? I mean, how does that happen? So that started my odyssey. That was in 2002, and I've been on this odyssey for the last 20 years.
Damn. Wow. So what did the editor say when you're like, I got something, when you came back with that? Rather than like run of the mill.
He said, Nick, let's just try to stick with Satanism.
What do you think when you how many Satanists have you talked to, and like what's their like life philosophy? Isn't it just pretty much like selfishness or like?
Well, I mean, there's different types of Satanists.
Because if that's the case, I might be a Satanist. I'm pretty selfish with my lifestyle.
Dude. You're not talking enough.
There's different types of Satanists, and they run the gamut. Some of them, it was very strange. Some of the Satanists that I talked to were really, really stupid, and some of them were really, really smart.
Yeah.
I didn't find any Satanists in between. But I was going to go to one of the black masses. It was a simple plan. I'm going to go to this black mass, and I'm going to write an article about it. And one of the high priest said I had to read this book written by one of the Satanists, the founder of that particular satanic sect. And I read the book, and I said, well, I read the book. And he said, well, you got to do this. And then I just, he was trying to lead me down this primrose path to to embracing Beelzebub, and I realized that they were actually proselytizing to me, and it wasn't really like a religion that I felt attracted to.
Sure.
Didn't you have to like eat like wasn't the part
eat like a cum cookie?
He was trying to get you to eat like
yes.
cum.
Well, that was one of the problems.
Was your editor like, come on?
The host was the potentiated ministration and semen of the high priestess and then the priest.
On what?
And
what was the like
on like a floury wafer? With the Satanists, everything is anti, like it's an anti-host,
Sure.
you know. So and it's an anti-black mass, whatever. But well, that was the deal. If I read the book, I wouldn't have to take the anti-host.
Right.
And
really? That was like if you don't read the that makes sense.
You read the book and you won't have to, but then I read the book and I said, I read the book and they said, no, you still have to take the anti-host.
What the fuck?
So I'm really up to, I like people to live up to their word. That's important to me. And it was kind of apparent to me that the people in the darker fraternity didn't share his truth the way that I did.
But and you were at an ashram, right? When you were younger?
I lived in an ashram when I was 19 years old.
How'd you fall into that? It's like it's not necessarily Hindu, but it's
this was a Hindu. This was a swami. He was from India. He was
swami.
He was a genuine Indian guru.
The Raiders.
When I was in my teens, I was really searching. Mm-hmm. And I tried all kinds of spiritual paths. And then I ended up living on this ashram with a genuine Indian guru. He was a swami, which means he was celibate. And so I got there and I was thirsty for knowledge. And then I was talking to the swami one day and I could have sworn I smelled cigarettes on his breath. And, you know, I went to one of the people on the ashram who I would later call the pod people. I said, I could have sworn I smelled cigarettes on Swami's breath. And he goes, yeah, well, see, the deal with that is he has to have one vice that keeps him tethered to this plane of reality so he can teach us. And now, needless to say, that didn't make a lot of sense to me. And then I found out that he was having sex with all these girls on the ashram. And then I found out he was embezzling money from his more affluent initiates. And I was thinking to myself, that guy must be really spiritually developed. if he's got to do all that just to stay on this plane of reality. I think
that's why I sold weed for so long.
Yeah. That was a bit of a swami.
No. Yeah, I always find that intriguing when people end up on because they seem like a cool place to live. It's just a place you would go. Rather than like a Christian youth thing, it would just be like.
I'm fairly certain every single one of those is that.
What do you think?
I don't know if I've heard of one story.
You'll be smirching all the masters.
I've never heard of one guru that wasn't definitely banging a bunch of the people.
Yes, that's what I concluded. Because I looked into a lot of different gurus after that, and they all have lower chakra problems.
Really?
Every guru has lower chakra. They're old, ugly Indian men, and then they're
trying to get Bob's and Vagine, and they found the best way to get Bob's.
That's true.
And then they come here, and they have all these beautiful young American women who are spiritually starved, throwing themselves at these, and then it's too much temptation.
Yeah, how could they resist?
Yeah, it's like I found a book. Chakra. I found a book in a used bookstore one time. They write really good books though. Like I read, this was by a priest, and it was like one of the best little books on spirituality I ever read. And I'm like, I got to Google this guy, pedophile. I was like, motherfucker.
Damn it.
Yeah.
Well, I read Rama's books, and I was really fascinated by them, and. So, that's why I ended up at that ashram.
So, what do you want to get into first here? Because I read the beginning of I read about half of the Franklin Scandal. And like I said, I was falling asleep. I listen to audiobooks at night. So I was listening to the Franklin Scandal at night, and it was fucking me up. Like every night I was like, Jesus Christ. And then I would start, I never went to sleep. I would just start Googling things like the Finders. Immediately I started Googling that. And then I started going into like Pizzagate because it was in DC. And they were attracting this, like, then I was like, is Pizzagate real? Like, it just, every time I started reading, is Pizzagate real?
I have no idea on that one. I'm agnostic towards pizza. With my philosophic training, I studied philosophy in college. I try to approach everything agnostically. I really try not to make judgments on something, even though it may seem like a tautological truth. I try to withhold judgment. And with Pizzagate, I'm agnostic.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But with the Finders, it was the same. I mean, I was listening to you talk about it, but it was the same thing where it's like once you explain, like 6 children were found with 2 dudes in suits. Were they wearing like suits?
Yeah.
And the children are all malnourished enough so that just a regular person called the cops when they saw them.
Concerned citizens.
And then they got nothing. It was like, yo, this is very weird. And then,
there's no way they were like, no, we're just making sure they're good. We just like to dress nice, and we didn't have the budget for their clothes yet.
And the guys wouldn't talk, right, when they were getting
They
interrogated.
had the card ready, to be like.
And one guy actually went unconscious when the police started to grill him.
He went into a satanic trance.
He played possum.
I don't know if it was satanic, but he just went unconscious. Yeah,
it's a good way to resist.
It's in the U.S.
I might do that to my wife.
Just dead weight. She starts talking to you. Get a card.
You might have to hook your wife up with the Finders, which I know might be I don't know if I'd advise that, but you never know.
That is crazy because you can do that. There's a lot of people, I'm sure you know this, who are delighted in being like, that's all a bunch of bull. They don't want to hear any of it whatsoever. But that's like, how much of it is like as you say, like some of it's conjecture, some of it is like how much of the stuff you've done is like ends in kind of like some nebulous weird stuff, or like what's like factual anyone could take and be like, this actually happened.
I mean, the Franklin scandal, I was very, very cautious with it and very, very careful. I wanted to nail everything because I knew what I was, the book that I was writing was so antithetical to people's mundane reality that it was going to be met with very, very, a lot of skepticism.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what happened with me with the Franklin scandal is I was able to score, like there were 3 grand juries that covered it up. There were 2 grand juries in Nebraska and 1 grand jury in Washington, D.C. Now, I don't know if your viewers are familiar with the grand jury, but grand juries are infamous for covering things up. Actually, like there was a grand jury in Florida looking into Epstein that said that Epstein hadn't molested a single child. What happens in a grand jury is a special prosecutor is chosen, and then grand jurors are just regular people that have come in to do jury duty, and they've been funneled to a grand jury. And it's not adversarial. The special prosecutor picks the evidence that is shown to the grand jurors and calls the witnesses. So special prosecutors have a tremendous amount of power over grand jurors. And actually, there was a New York judge that had a famous quip that grand jurors have so much power, or special prosecutors have so much power over grand jurors that they could get them to indict a ham sandwich. Yeah. So with the Franklin,
I've indicted a few of those.
With the Franklin scandal, those 2 grand juries in Nebraska said that not a single child had been abused.
Yeah,
and
I read the article you sent as far as like, I know this is gross detail, but one of the reasons they were able to discount the children who said they were molested by Epstein was one of them said he used a purple vibrator and another one said he used a white vibrator. So they were like, well, these 2 are lying.
What?
Yeah, I mean,
like he's just a one vibrator.
Something like that.
They only called one of the victims.
Okay.
One of the underage victims. And it was obvious that was a cover-up job.
Yeah.
And it's really a shame that most Americans, because when you think of a grand jury, you think the gods of jurisprudence have spoken, but that's not the case at all. It's just a special prosecutor that's been chosen to show grand jurors what he thinks is compelling evidence.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of cover-ups take place, is in grand juries. And then everything is sealed in a grand jury. And what happened with me is I was able to get everything. I was able to get the sealed testimony, and I was able to get the sealed exhibits from one of the corrupt grand juries in Nebraska, which at that point, I was able to write the book. And like I had a list of 60 victims. So it was up to me to find the victims. And that was tough because a lot of those kids, and you see it with Epstein too, you see it with a lot of pedophile networks. A lot of the kids come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds and dysfunctional families, and that makes them ripe for predators. In this case, with the Franklin scandal, Lawrence King, and also Craig Spence, and with Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein, and all the predators that were around him. So finding them was very, very difficult because a lot of them had just dropped off the plane just dropped off the planet because these kids were from really dysfunctional backgrounds, poor backgrounds, and they were given money and repeatedly molested. And then once they lost their youthful marketability, they were expunged by the network. And they went on to become criminals to support. They were all drug addicts.
Yeah.
Or most of them were drug addicts. So they became criminals and then they ended up in prison. So it was very difficult to find a lot. A lot of them never really used their social security numbers. So, and I found them in projects. I found one in a homeless shelter. I found one in a prison. I mean, they were difficult.
Yeah,
to
they
find.
messed up.
Yeah. What are they? How like? Are they like excited to talk to you, or are they just kind of like, who are you, or like, how did you get to like have them actually talk to you about this stuff?
Well, you've got to be patient and you've got to be compassionate. I mean, I was very compassionate to all the victims that I met because of what they've been through. And it's a matter of trust. I mean, you've got to build up trust with them. Sometimes the trust comes immediately and sometimes it takes a while to build up the trust. But once you build trust with them, they will, tell you about the worst horrors of their life.
So let's get what happened with the Franklin scandal.
So with the Franklin scandal, it was a large interstate pedophile network that was that flew kids from coast to coast, but a lot of and I also got flight receipts, like 200 flight receipts. A lot of the planes that they rented or chartered went to Washington, D.C. And in Washington, D.C., there was a lobbyist power broker named Craig Spence. And he was a CIA asset, and his house was wired for audiovisual blackmail. I get into his reality pretty heavily in Confessions of a DC Madam, and I also get into it in the Franklin scandal, but a little more in Confessions of a DC Madam.
Well, so Gardini, does his mic have to move up a little bit towards him?
Tiny bit.
Just you can slide this thing down. Let me see.
The Wild Wild West.
Right.
So these pedophile parties would happen at Craig Spence's mansion in the Kalorama section of Washington, D.C., and it would be like pretty much a straight political party initially. There would be Washington, D.C. literati and glitterati and power brokers and politicians.
Clarence Thomas.
They would attend these parties, but then like maybe at 10 o'clock or something, someone would fire up a joint or something sexually inappropriate would happen. And these people have been plied with alcohol. So if someone wanted to stick around for the after party, then they would be compromised.
So you see like the level of grease a person could handle. Like
Yes.
the girls would come out.
They would get me.
Bust out a line. Yeah.
I'd be hammered doing. Yeah, they'd get me.
They'd
get me.
You don't want to say that.
I'm truthful. I only deal in truth.
So
they would get me, dude.
So didn't it go all the way back to like to the start of the Franklin scandal stuff? It went back to Vietnam, supposedly.
Well,
that was
King
like
and the two primary pimps, Lawrence King and Craig Spence. King during Vietnam. King was in Thailand with a security clearance, a top security clearance, and Craig Spence was in Vietnam as a reporter for ABC. So they were both in Thailand at the same time. I'm surmising that, and this is just my surmise, I'm surmising that both of them were molesting kids in Southeast Asia. And then ultimately the dark corner of intelligence that does this type of stuff got a hold of them and said, you can either do time or you can work for us.
Yeah.
Because when both came back to the United States of America, I mean, they were both from working class families, and all of a sudden their careers just went exponentially high. So I'm thinking that was probably the deal that they made while they were in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And it's the Franklin scandal because Larry King was in.
Lawrence E. King
Omaha
owned he was the general manager of the Franklin Credit Union.
Yeah,
and it was like his personal ATM. When it's kind of interesting, the feds, you're supposed to be audited every year if you run a credit union, but he hadn't been audited in 4 years. So shortly after George Herbert Walker Bush won the presidency, the Franklin Credit Union was raided by IRS and FBI, and there was $40 million missing. But basically, that credit union was a cash machine for Lawrence King, but it was also a front for this interstate pedophile network that they ran together.
And he was definitely pimping.
Absolutely, both he and Craig Spence were pimping. And
ABC reporter.
Yes. Craig Spence was the guy who ended up in Washington, D.C.
Oh, shit.
So
yeah. He was the one who was having the parties.
Oh, so that was the guy who was hosting the functions.
I mean, the parties were all over, but Spence's, the intelligence, like I said, the dark corner of intelligence that does this type of stuff had installed the cameras, the hidden cameras. And Epstein, now this is kind of interesting, Maria Farmer, who worked for Epstein, said that Epstein showed her the secret room where men, as in plural, were monitoring all these monitors, and that all the bedrooms and all the bathrooms had hidden cameras. So that setup was very much like the setup in Craig Spence's house, where both places were wired for audiovisual blackmail.
Yeah, so Craig Spence was the Epstein of this particular story.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I got you. He was the party boy.
He was the party boy.
Cool guy. He was a cool guy.
He was a cool guy, dude.
He was a cool guy at the operation.
He was. Craig Spence was the Prince of Darkness.
Yeah.
Was he into Satanism too?
I do not know.
Well, I mean, I guess kind of. Yeah.
I do not know, but nothing
He's a
about
good Christian.
That guy was a pure psychopath, so nothing that he would do would surprise me. He was a pedophile, a psychopath, a drug addict.
Jesus.
And he was, I mean, the cream of the crop in Washington, D.C. politics would go to his parties. And
isn't that strange? Yeah, isn't that kind of weird? The same thing with who was it when Gates had to go to Epstein for like funding or whatever? It's always strange. Like,
well, you know, the thing about Gates and Epstein is there's an article from the Evening Standard, the cover story. There's so many problems with the Epstein cover story, but there's an article from the Evening Standard from the UK that says that Spence or Epstein and Gates were doing business in the 90s, that their relationship went back to the 90s.
Really?
So if that's true, everything that we've been sold about Gates and Epstein is all bullshit, which wouldn't surprise me at all.
Makes sense.
Because with Epstein, the media has just been into digging up salacious dirt. They haven't been screaming. The Epstein article that I wrote, which no major magazine would touch, called for justice. All these kids were molested. We need justice. And but that doesn't seem to be a priority. And the Franklin Network was much bigger than Spence's network. The Franklin Network, I think, was around for about 12 years, and Epstein's network was around for about 25 years. But the Franklin Network was bigger, and I thought it was a kinder, gentler pedophile network initially, but then I've come to believe that because the Franklin Network, a lot of those kids were pandered to sadistic pedophiles, and there was a lot of pornography made. Child pornography. And I think the same thing was happening with Epstein.
Oh, you're saying that you thought the Epstein one was quote unquote gentler?
Yes.
And, okay.
But now that I've gotten to know the Epstein network pretty well, Epstein was pandering girls under the age of 10, 2 8-year-olds that I'm aware of, but I'm sure that there were more. And he was also pandering these girls to really sadistic pedophiles. Or some of the clients were very sadistic pedophiles.
Yeah, because didn't his first case get sealed in the same? Was that sealed in a grand jury as well?
Yeah, that was the one in Florida.
Yeah, that was one. Epstein was like, he got in trouble.
I could be wrong here, but it was like, it was going to be tried like a regular trial. And then Rick, what's the guy's name? He came in and said, no, let's make it a grand jury. So it was sealed.
Well, that was Barry Kirshner, the state attorney. What happened there was a 14-year-old girl went to the Palm Beach Police Department with her parents, and she said that she'd been molested by Jeffrey Epstein. And the Palm Beach, and she described Epstein, she described his house, she described his anatomy, and the Palm Beach Police Department started a year-long investigation into Epstein at that point. And what happened after that year investigation is that they felt like they had statements from 5 victims, and then they had 12 corroborating statements.
Yeah.
So they were immediately going to arraign him on 5 counts of child abuse. But then that case got taken away by Barry Kushner in the state of Florida. And then there was a grand jury, which is very strange because usually grand juries in Florida are reserved for capital cases. Mm-hmm. So, and then that grand jury found that Jeffrey Epstein hadn't molested a single child. And only one of, and here's the thing with that. The Palm Beach Police Department had the statements of 5 underage victims, but they were aware of 17 more. So there were 20, the Palm Beach Police Department was aware of 23 underage victims. And that prosecutor only called 1. So it's very obvious to me that that was a cover up.
Jeez. And then the matter was sealed. But didn't he have a sex offense under his belt after that or something?
Well, here's what happened. So when that grand jury came back and said that Jeffrey Epstein hadn't molested a single child, Michael Ryder, who was one of the heroes in this story, he was the chief of the Palm Beach Police Department. He got very vociferous. He raised Cain. He said, and he went to the feds and they said, this is obvious malfeasance by this grand jury and you've got to do something about it. So the feds were going to get into it. They were going to arrest Jeffrey Epstein. Well, they were talking that there was going to be a grand jury, and then all of a sudden the grand jury was adjourned and there was this really unctuous deal made. And I've got the emails between the assistant U.S. attorney and one of Epstein's attorneys, Jay Lefkowitz, and Anne-Marie Villafana was the assistant U.S. attorney. And they're talking about how they can minimize Epstein's sentence. And then one of the emails says, and the deal that they made was so corrupt that they had to go to a special magistrate to sign off on it. And basically what that deal did is it exonerated everyone. It exonerated the procurers, it exonerated the perpetrators. Jeffrey Epstein had to plead guilty to a single count of child abuse. He was sentenced to 18 months in a county jail. He did 13, and he had his little wing of the jail decked out like the Taj Mahal. So, he could go out during the day. So he was molesting girls during the day while he was, supposedly doing. No.
He was doing
time.
Like nights there.
Yeah, he only had to spend nights.
What? What?
Yeah.
Also, and this was 2008. He got arrested. He did serve time technically in 2008 for what, like 13 of the 18 months.
Yeah, like he did 13. But here's the deal with that.
He kept hanging out with all these people.
But here's the deal with that.
Yeah. BG was hanging out with him after
Bill
that.
Gates was still chilling.
Yeah.
The feds had a list of 32 Epstein victims. 32. And they did nothing with any of that. And according to Alexander Acosta, who is the U.S. attorney in the Southern District of Florida, he was told to back away from Epstein because Epstein was quote unquote intelligence. So, and to the kind of power that is required to get a U.S. attorney to stand down can be done by 2 people. It can be done by the attorney general. It can be done by the president. Damn. So that's how high the strings were pulled. Same with Franklin. The strings were pulled at the very apex of power.
Jesus, man. That's terrifying. That's fucking terrifying.
It doesn't speak well of our society.
Yeah, I want to see you on Good Morning America. That'd be great.
Yeah. But I don't know, isn't it just, they're just clearly intelligence? Like there's no real debate here anymore, right?
Well, it's kind of interesting.
How else could this be done?
New York Magazine conscripted 6 quote unquote experts on Epstein. And I was one of them. And I cut my teeth with Epstein in 2012, and I acquired his black book in 2012. And I tried to sell an article about his black book, and nobody in the mainstream media wanted to touch it. Finally, Gawker touched it, and then we put his black book up on the internet along with a bunch of his...
With all the names and stuff?
What was in the black book?
The names went to Mount Olympus.
Yeah.
in the Black Book. He had like 22 contact numbers for Clinton and 17 contact numbers for.
Why would they keep a book? I don't understand why they would keep a record of that.
Probably so you don't get killed in prison.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
It's, people like that are very arrogant and they think that they can get away with
True,
everything.
yeah.
I mean, they've had Jeffrey Epstein had been trafficking children probably since 1995, and actually he was the first time he was reported was 1996 to the FBI, and nothing happened. So he thought that he could do anything he wanted.
Yeah.
And the one thing that was interesting, the guy who got the Black Book, who took it out of there, who took it out of Epstein's possession, I think he got 18 months in jail. He got the same punishment as Epstein did
for moving the book.
Except he had to go to a real prison, a federal prison.
Federal prison.
What?
It's the guy who stole the Black Book. Yeah,
and
I'll let him tell it.
Alfredo Rodriguez purloined. He was Epstein's house manager and purloined the book, and it ultimately. And then he tried to sell it to a lawyer that was launching civil suits at Epstein because he was representing these underage victims, and it's pretty interesting. So Alfredo Rodriguez approached the lawyer. The lawyer went to the FBI. The FBI did a sting and got the Black Book. And then that's kind of how I got the Black Book. Can't really give out the source, but Alfredo Rodriguez circled the names of people that he felt were part of Epstein's network. And there's a lot of names that are circled. And it's kind of interesting. Virginia Giuffre, who was one of Epstein's victims, has named a number of the same people in her lawsuit documentation.
Who were some of those people? If you
she named Ehud Barak, Alan Dershowitz, and both of them are circled. Prince
Henry, right?
Prince Andrew. He's got multiple contacts, but I don't think his name was circled. Let me see. A couple of former mayor or governors of New Mexico, Bruce King and Bill Richardson, were circled. And the thing about Richardson, he was also Clinton's energy czar. So, and then a number of big time financiers were circled too. So it was like with the Franklin scandal, it was the cream of the crop of our society.
Jesus.
Unfortunately, the upper crust is a bunch of dough held together by crumbs, or a bunch of crumbs held together by dough. Yeah. I got that one.
So, there's a link been, I guess so. The link's been made between the CIA or like, does anyone even know what they do besides like doing like sex traps? Like what else is, why are they doing that? I mean, obviously to like trap people up, but like
power.
Yeah.
It's all about power.
Yeah.
And the CIA started with a mandate when Harry Truman originally started the CIA. It was a precarious time. Joseph Stalin had the hydrogen bomb. And Joseph Stalin was someone who had zero appreciation of humanity. But what happened there was the CIA started its own funding mechanisms, and then also the honey traps, because they felt it was too important, that fighting communism was too important to be left to politicians. So that's where this really dark part of the CIA comes in. Is the various types of schemes to make money, and then also the honey traps.
Yeah, did you talk about William Colby at all?
In the Franklin scandal, I do talk about William Colby.
Who's William Colby?
He was director, I think.
He was the former director of the CIA, and actually there was in the Church hearing there was a senator named Frank Church in 1977 who wanted to blow the lid open on a lot of the CIA's nefarious activities, and he did a lot. And there were two, William Colby was called, and Dick Helms was called, Richard Helms. Richard Helms was the then director of the CIA, and Colby had been the former director of the CIA. And Colby really showed people how nefarious the CIA was some of the stuff that it was doing. But Helms kept his mouth shut. And what's interesting with Colby is he was actually conscripted. The Franklin Committee, what happened when Lawrence King was busted embezzling $40 million and wasn't charged with a single count of child abuse, there was a Franklin Committee that formed that was part of, it was the Nebraska Senate. It was a subcommittee of the Nebraska Senate. And they had a very good investigator. His name was Gary Caradori. And a lot of the evidence that I have comes from Gary Caradori, like the list of the 60 victims that I had, that came from Gary Caradori. The flight receipts that I got, that came from Gary Caradori. All this was put into a grand jury and sealed, but a lot of he was an amazing investigator. And his plane, what happened, the FBI was hunting for him. I mean, here was the hunter became the prey, because he was finding victims and he was finding all kinds of stuff that was corroborating these kids. And these kids were coming forward and being videotaped. And if the dominoes had started to fall in Nebraska, they would have fallen all the way to Washington, D.C. So it had to be covered up at all costs. And Gary Caradori realized that the FBI was trying to put him away for scripting what these kids were saying. I mean, it was, none of the kids said that, but the FBI was, what the FBI did in Nebraska was very, very nefarious. Threatening perpetrators, threatening victims. So what Caradori realized that he needed blackmail pictures, that was going to be absolute proof what was going on. And he got a hold of a blackmail photographer named Rusty Nelson. And they met in Chicago. And I've got 5 corroborations on this, that Rusty gave him pictures in Chicago. And Gary Caradori was flying back to Nebraska, and his plane blew up in midair. And then that was pretty much, and then the grand juries came out, shortly thereafter and said that there was no child abuse. And there's that Chinese proverb, kill one man, silence 1,000. Well, with this case, it was kill one man and his son and silence, 10,000, because nobody was willing to come forward after that, especially after the state and the feds had said that there was no child abuse. But the Franklin subcommittee hired William Colby to look into the death of Gary Caradori. And he didn't say that Gary Caradori had been assassinated publicly, but he did tell people that were affiliated with the committee that Gary Caradori had definitely been assassinated.
Damn.
So, and there were a lot of other suspicious deaths in the Franklin scandal. I mean, every chapter there's a strange death or two. Pseudo suicides and things like that. Yeah.
Jesus Christ, man, that's nuts. And the Rusty guy, that's the guy you were driving with and got pulled over with?
Yes, I was. I myself was looking for blackmail pictures, and which I don't know if that was very prudent, but I was. And Rusty said that he had some. Now, Rusty is a guy that he takes blackmail pictures of adults and children engaged in sexual.
How do you get into that?
I guess.
Yeah. How do you get into it?
Water rises to its own level, I guess. I mean, true, it's like, so, I relationship would be too strong, but I forged kind of an alliance with Rusty because he was having a lot of problems with legal problems. And I said that I would help pay for his legal bills. All he had to do was provide me with blackmail pictures, which he said he had. So he took me on a wild goose chase to get blackmail pictures, and we didn't get any. And then I was driving him home on this desolate highway, and we got pulled over. And I started the Franklin scandal out with this, is the cops, I show the cops my ID, and he doesn't even look at it. He says, get out of the car. And then he deposits me in his car, and then and then he runs me through and I'm clean, but then he runs Rusty Nelson through, and then there's a lot of numbers after him, and I'm sure that they weren't nice numbers. So they take Rusty out and then they rip apart the car that I rented, and all they found was my ginseng root. So that was about it. But Rusty gave me a lot of insight. I would never use Rusty as a sole source, but Rusty gave me a lot of insight because one day I asked him, how does this work? And he said, it's like you're on a yacht and it's a beautiful day and you can have anything you want on this yacht. But if you decide to get off the yacht, the people on the yacht are going to make sure that you drown. So once you are compromised, there's zero motivation to come forward. And it's very interesting. I wrote about, in Confessions of a DC Madam, I picked out some politicians who had been obviously compromised. One was Larry Craig. And Larry Craig was a very conservative representative and then senator. And he was in Washington, D.C. for 25 years. And he had the worst record of voting against gay rights, I believe, in the Senate, if not the worst, certainly up there. But he was getting gay escorts from Henry Vincent, who ran an escort service. Henry was the guy who I wrote the book with, Confessions of a D.C. Madam. So Craig was getting escorts from Henry, and then he was getting escorts from elsewhere because Kirby Dick's film, Outrage, talks about Craig getting escorts elsewhere. And then Craig was busted in an airport bathroom in Minneapolis trying to pick up a vice squad cop. So here's a U.S. senator. Here's a U.S. senator trying to pick up someone in a bathroom. I mean, a U.S. So how hard would it be to compromise that guy?
Yeah, true.
I mean, a kid doing an after-school, project with a smartphone could compromise Larry Craig.
So wait, he was in an airport?
Easily.
He was in an airport.
His flight get delayed. He was like, you know what?
It's kind of interesting.
The old foot tap in the bathroom.
Yeah, it was the foot tap because I'm from Minneapolis and I've been to that airport innumerable times. And I was going to the bathroom once in one of the stalls and somebody next to me was slapping his foot on the ground. And I was thinking to myself, poor guy, he's got to have like a neurological disorder or something.
You wanted to play.
Yeah, he saw your shoes.
Now, an interesting guy is...
fair game. I would have been pissed.
And this is kind of interesting. Dennis Hastert he was the Speaker of the House for 7 years, from, I believe, 1999 to 2006. And he was a strong arm specialist, but he was a pedophile. He had been molesting kids going back 4 years. And there was a whistleblower named Sibel Edmonds who talked about Hastert because the FBI knew about Hastert going to a house of ill repute while he was Speaker of the House, a town in Chicago. So the FBI knew that Hastert was a pedophile, or chances are they knew that he was a pedophile. And for some inexplicable reason, they took him down. I don't know why the feds took him down, and he had to do some time. The only thing that I can think of is he was getting too greedy and he was told to back off because he had a lobbying business that just exploded exponentially, especially with Turkey. So we don't really know the exact mechanisms of what he did to be taken down, but it was very strange, that whole thing. And then everything was sealed and there was gag orders. So I was really looking very hard into Hastert, but I just couldn't get any information at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I could see the thing you're saying about the guys getting on to like the special crews. If you're like a rising star politically, you're probably feeling pretty good. You're like, I'm the man. I'm making money now. All this stuff. And then someone's like, hey, come hang with the big boys. You smoke a joint with him. You're like, oh.
Yeah.
Like a girl comes out and like, yeah, by the way, she was 15.
Yeah, you get done and they're like, yeah, she was 16.
Yeah.
It's like,
we own you now.
Damn.
Yeah, I mean, it's that easy.
Yeah.
And when you think about like our politicians, they've got a potent psychological alchemy of power, lust, and arrogance. And nothing makes people stupid like arrogance and lust.
Yeah.
I mean, really smart people do unbelievably stupid
Why are you
things
pointing to me?
because of arrogance and lust.
Arrogance and lust.
Yeah, that's
And-
nuts. And then if you don't play ball, they can probably just block you out altogether anyway. If you're like, no, that stuff's not for me, they're like, all right,
Yeah, I
this
think-
guy's gonna lose. Fuck him.
Yeah.
But I've been in this realm for 20 years now.
Mhm.
And what Americans don't understand is that many of our politicians are compromised.
Mhm.
And take Epstein for an instance. With Epstein, he was blackmailing some of the most powerful men in the world. He had hidden cameras. When the Palm Beach Police Department searched his home in Palm Beach, they found hidden cameras. He had hidden cameras in his New York residence that Maria Farmer talked about, where multiple men were looking at the monitors. And his island was also wired for audiovisual blackmail. So
Jeez.
he was blackmailing people. And what people don't understand is a guy like Jeffrey Epstein, a guy he's from a blue collar family in Coney Island. He's a college dropout. A guy like that cannot blackmail some of the most powerful men in the world because they have access. A lot of them have access to thugs and organized crime. Like Les Wexner is heavily enmeshed in organized crime.
Who's
And
that?
He was the billionaire. He owned Victoria's Secret. He was the billionaire that gave Jeffrey Epstein millions of
Oh,
dollars.
right, yeah.
And if Epstein was in fact
He
black,
owned Victoria's Secret and he still had to go to the pedophile parties.
it's
It's like, bro, you have it.
I mean, your
Well,
store, just the mannequins
I would just
alone, that's
whack
enough
off
for
in the
me.
mall.
Yeah,
I'd be like, let me in the
just
mall at night.
Yeah, just the mannequins alone.
I mean, he's a old, frightening, scary looking dude.
What?
I mean, if I was a young woman and he showed up, I mean, I'd split. But anyway,
Yeah.
so there's no way that Epstein could have been blackmailing these people by himself.
Right.
There was obviously a large organization behind him that said to these people that were blackmailed, and Spence had the same thing with the Franklin scandal. If you come after this guy, there's going to be huge retribution, and that's what kept, I believe, Jeffrey Epstein alive.
How
makes sense.
many types of those organizations do you think are running? Because I mean, they caught Epstein,
Yeah.
but how many of those do you think? Like, I mean, that has to be a pretty consistent.
Yes, I think that networks like that are ubiquitous in the United States of America. Because of the writing that I've done the last 20 years, a lot of people have talked to me about these networks, and they want me to investigate them. And I'm only one guy,
Yeah.
so I tell them, I don't know if I can really help, because you can tell when you see major judicial malfeasance. That can be an indication that there's a network there.
Oh, yeah.
It was what I was talking earlier, like in central Pennsylvania, there was the Penn State, the
Yes,
Jerry Sandusky
right.
thing. There was I think a district attorney that was looking into the case years before, and he vanished.
Yes,
I mean,
he
there's
was.
some,
He was found. He vanished. His car was found by, I think, a lake,
The river. I think the Susquehanna
yeah.
River.
And I did talk to a prosecutor under him, and she believed that Jerry Sandusky was part of a pedophile network. She really believed that, and she believed that prosecutor had also been murdered too.
It sounded like,
Jesus.
yeah, I mean, it sounded like it because it was from the Second Mile Foundation, which was a lot like Boys Town.
Yes,
It was for troubled kids.
Yeah.
Jerry Sandusky was doing this, but then this is a weird story. I was at the first game Joe Paterno didn't coach.
Mhm.
So it was the week after that story broke.
You went to that game?
I went to that game. I was pretty excited about it, but we were supposed to go. I went to a Second Mile dinner.
What?
A dude that was high up at Merrill Lynch, I think,
Uh-huh.
or one of those, Goldman Sachs.
Yeah.
We went to his house. He was a Penn State alumni. I don't want to besmirch him because he might not have been a pedophile.
Oh, yeah.
But it was supposed to be a Second Mile dinner with like Joe Paterno, Sandusky, like all these guys.
What?
And then I was walking around his giant mansion. It's just a picture of him with every single president, all these things.
Really?
I don't know. It's just like you can see the political power these dudes have.
Yeah.
They have that power. And then the one guy who's friends with all them is doing exactly what they were doing in the Franklin scandal, which is getting kids out of a orphanage type situation and banging them. He was
a lower socioeconomic.
Give him the work.
Predators know how to prey.
And then a district attorney just vanished. Was it a district attorney who
Yeah,
vanished?
I can't think of his name, but yes.
They found his laptop and the hard drive was taken out of it.
I mean, dude.
Like, it was like, yeah.
That was, there's indications that was a network. But I pursued that for quite some time, I got pretty close to somebody who could help corroborate it, but I couldn't nail it. So, and that's the thing. Investigations like this, like the Franklin scandal, it took 7 years to investigate that. And I've been investigating Epstein since 2012. I'm ready to write a really good book on Epstein. I'm finishing up one book, and I'd like to write, because so many of
keep that quiet until it's out.
So many of the books on Epstein have been Epstein light, like Filthy Rich on Netflix.
Yeah, that Netflix show was like terrible. I turned it off.
Was it really? I didn't even watch
Dude,
it.
they don't even come close.
Really?
They do the same thing with Sandusky, where they're like, yeah, it was just one guy. We got him. It's like, no.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, I never thought about the grand jury thing before. That is kind of an indicator. Be like, well, let's do like a special trial for this guy. It's like, I didn't even know what those things were, to be honest. I thought that was like, ooh, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Americans have no idea about grand juries and how easy they are to corrupt. So it's unfortunate that so many Americans are unaware of so many things about their judiciary.
It's also, it's like the same reason people weren't taking your articles. It's like, people don't want to, like, they don't want to know.
Yeah.
Like, if I told this to my dad, he'd be like, what?
Yeah.
Shut up. Like, he'd be like, I don't want to even think about this.
Yeah, or like there's creeps out there.
Yeah.
But
there's only one member of my family that reads anything I write. So people don't want to. I mean, but if you want to be an ostrich and stick your head in the sand, I mean, the evil is only going to get larger and larger and larger. I mean, and that's the problem. As I said earlier, a huge problem has been the media. The media was into digging up salacious dirt, and that was it. No one called for any kind of justice. The New York Times did an article that named 6 procurers, aka pimps, and the only one that's been indicted is Maxwell.
Yeah.
So there, and if Epstein was an actual trial, if there was jurisprudence that wasn't corrupted, those procurers, and we know more than 6, but you could start with those 6. Those 6 procurers would be indicted on multiple counts of child trafficking. A count of child trafficking is anywhere from 15 years to life. Mm-hmm. So you could rack up, they could all be looking at 1,000 years or whatever, and then you'd get them to flip on the perps. I mean, that's how the mafia was taken down.
Yeah.
You get the lower people on the lower echelon to flip on the higher echelon and reduce their sentences. But there's been none of that. Ghislaine Maxwell is, and the Ghislaine Maxwell trial was such a travesty of justice. The girls or women now who really knew a lot about the network and who were molested by some very powerful people, none of them were called. It was just the only victims that were called, and I think it was only 4, were molested by just Epstein and Maxwell.
Has Maxwell been sentenced to anything yet?
No, she has not been sentenced, and there's that judicial problem of one of the jurors saying that he'd been molested, and Maxwell, I don't know how that's winding right now, but the whole thing, everything about Epstein, there's nothing rational about it. Nothing makes sense. Laws of the land have just been thrown in the toilet and flushed.
How did you feel when he committed suicide allegedly? Did you know that was coming, or because it seemed like everyone was like, they're gonna kill him, and then one day the cameras didn't work and the guards took a break.
Well, the guards took a break. The cameras didn't work. I mean, it's
probably when you fix the cameras.
True.
Like, damn, the camera's broke. Oh, damn it.
It's certainly very suspicious.
Yeah.
I don't think there's ever been more of a clear somebody killed him case.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a guy in prison that the whole world was saying they're going to kill him.
Oh, yeah.
And then one day, I mean, they knew, the guards knew, this guy's a risk. And then one day, again, the cameras didn't work and the guards were taking a walk.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's a lot of anomalies. His cellmate was taken out of the cell.
I didn't even know he had a cellmate.
Yeah, he had a cellmate.
What?
And
The guy got taken out of the cell and then he.
Yeah.
This
So,
is crazy.
That must have been crazy. Like, what are you in here for? It's like,
Yeah.
well, if you watch
And
it,
actually,
tricked
his
Bill Clinton
cellmate
into
had
fucking
been
a
a-
14-year-old.
His cellmate had been a multiple murderer at one point.
What?
A former police officer, and
Whoa.
they took him out. And what's kind of interesting, William Barr, our illustrious Attorney General, who helped. Now, this is kind of interesting. And this is where Franklin and Epstein connect. William Barr was Bush 1's Attorney General after Richard Thornburg ran for the Senate. And Barr helped cover up the Franklin scandal. And then Barr played an integral role in covering up the Epstein scandal.
damn.
And Barr said when Epstein killed himself, heads are going to roll, and no heads rolled. And
Yeah.
actually, the warden of that particular Metropolitan Correctional Facility in New York, she was given a cushy job in New Jersey. That she was.
What?
Yeah, I mean, so
Thornburg, by the way, wasn't he Harrisburg's governor? Pennsylvania?
Thornburg was Pennsylvania.
Hey, that links
governor of
second mile.
Pennsylvania. Yeah.
Really? What
There's
about Ed
Sandusky.
Rendell? What about Ed Rendell?
He hasn't come up, but Thornburg definitely helped cover up
Spud.
the Franklin scandal.
Thornburg
And then-
helped that? Yeah, see?
and then Barr. And
What?
then- and then Barr. Yeah.
Oh, God.
Thornburg is. I believe that Thornburg is a pretty dirty politician.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
What is
The guy whose house I was at, I was
Oh,
with.
is that what?
Nothing. This is getting too close. Now I'm part of the.
Part of the cabal.
I know. I'm part of the thing now.
Damn.
Yeah, the reason I was there was the guy I was with he worked with Thornburg,
What?
and we were at a second mile.
Dude,
See, this is what happens when I listen to this.
you start.
I'm like, oh no.
Yeah, you get it's unsettling.
Yeah.
It is weird though, because when you do boil it down to like you think about it, like little kids, it's just heartbreaking. But it's been politicized. The issue of sex trafficking, I would say, is kind of pursued more by people who lean to the right politically for some reason.
Well, actually, there's the feminist left and the religious right are equally against sex trafficking.
Yeah.
And they're strange, for lack of a better word, bedfellows. But I've been very disappointed by the anti-trafficking community because they have not been vociferous at all about what's happened with Epstein. We know who a lot of the perps are. We know who a lot of the procurers are. There should be a lot of people in prison right now.
Yeah.
But and it's really heartbreaking for me. I've spoke. The National Center on Sexual Exploitation has like an anti-trafficking summit, and I've spoken there at the last couple of years, and I've seen them do very little to get this issue out. Most of the anti-trafficking organizations, unfortunately, have not been vociferous about this issue at all.
Yeah. So
And it's heartbreaking to me because when the government doesn't work and when the media doesn't work, you've got a lot of anti-trafficking organizations. They should band together. I mean, if you're against child trafficking, you're categorically against child trafficking.
yeah.
And here is an obvious case of child trafficking being covered up, and none of these organizations are getting making any noise about it, which is very difficult for me because I know some of the people involved in these organizations, and I just expected more from them. It was troubling.
Yeah, so with the media in general? How do you think, like, how much of this stuff do you think they know and cover up, or how much does this stuff just not come across their like desk, or like have they had any like specific roles in like kind of?
It's hard to say. I will say this, that I do believe that a lot of people in the media are compromised.
Yeah.
And I think people very high in the media. And I don't know if this is true anymore, but it would be close. 6 corporations own 90% of the media that's imbibed by Americans. And I got to hand it to the CIA or intelligence or whatever you want to call it. I mean, they don't compromise people they go right up to the top when they compromise somebody. So I don't know exactly I've got some suspicions about who's compromised and who's not, but I don't know exactly. But I will say this, that the way that the media reacted to this with just, as I said earlier, just kicking out Salacious Dirt, it just was, it was an embarrassment for me as a journalist to see them, the way that the media handled this.
See, it seems like all they ever do is post a picture of Trump with Maxwell or something. Yeah. They never look into anybody who's guilty of, or not guilty, but who's been named. Yeah,
Virginia Giuffre named a bunch of them, and her in a deposition, and her deposition was unsealed, and a number of the people that she named were circled by Alfredo Rodriguez in the Black Book. So there you've got double corroboration, and but none of them have been arrested. I don't even know if any of them have been questioned. I mean, it's
Prince Andrew got hit. He got but it's weird. It's like it seemed like he settled with people, didn't he? Didn't he settle out of court?
Yeah, I think. I've heard 12 million, but I'm not exactly sure.
So, but he, that's kind of.
I think his mommy came in.
His mommy came in. Oh my God, man.
Yeah. That's embarrassing.
God,
you gotta wake your mom up in the middle of the night and be like, come on, you gotta stand in the doorway and go, Mom, Mother? Can I lay with you for a little?
Mother,
I'm in trouble. Oh, what did you do, Andrew?
Remember that cool island I was going to?
Remember I kept going to the cool parties with the other 12-year-olds?
Yeah, so he got, his apology, that one interview, he came on and was just like, I'll admit I let my flap down. That was his whole thing.
Yeah. Well, he also said he didn't sweat too.
Yeah, he
sweat that interview too. I mean, it really, it really showed how stupid he is.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think it might be too much royal inbreeding amongst Europeans, but at that BBC interview, he really showed.
It's also he's probably just so out of touch with talking to any normal people.
For sure.
Normally, I'm sure he spent his whole life saying, "I don't sweat." And then everyone in the room went, "Oh wow, that's really interesting." Not one person ever was like, "What?"
Well, the messaging's weird because they're like, "I absolutely did not do that. I just apologized and let my side down. Also, here's $12 million." It's like, so wait, what did you do, dude? If someone's like, "You molested kids," I'm like, "No, I fucking didn't." Like, give us $12 million. I'm like, "No, I didn't molest any fucking kids.
I don't have it."
Yeah, that's just the weirdest part to me when it's like. Well, I absolutely did not, but I would apologize. It was a
have anybody else, Prince Andrew, but have any of these other people that have been named come out and talked about it or been? Because anytime I see Bill Gates, although Bill Gates was never really named in those books, was he?
Dude, he hung out with him for the weekend.
No, I know he was on like the
no, Bill Gates wasn't. But I think that according, as I said earlier, that Evening Standard article said that Gates and Epstein go back to the 1990s.
That's not great.
If that's true, I don't see how Bill Gates could not be compromised. And Bill Gates has shown libidinous behavior amongst his employees. So
really,
yeah, and
it's a good way to put it too. Libidinous behaviors.
So
nerd
libidinous,
rage,
predatory.
Yeah, it's nerd rage.
So it's difficult to know. If Epstein and Gates go back that far, I do not see how Bill Gates could not be compromised.
He hung out with him. He spent a weekend at his place post indictment.
After
the first indictment.
Yeah.
He was like, "Yeah, my bad. That was an oversight on my half. I needed money from him."
Yeah, he's like, "Well, he's dead now."
I know that was his thing. He said, "Well, he's dead now." So, yeah, it's hard for people to wrap their heads around, because it doesn't mean like every single person in the government's corrupt. It's just. There are psychos that don't get stopped, and
was there ever? Because I remember after the Epstein suicide, wasn't there was somebody who did the autopsy that said this was conducive with hanging, or not hanging, self-hanging, but there was struggle.
Yeah, there's been a number of people that have come out. Julie Brown of Miami Herald, who wrote the series of articles that really outed Epstein. She's convinced that Epstein didn't kill himself.
But will there ever be an investigation?
There's never been any investigation with anything with Epstein. There's, the last time there was an investigation, it was the Palm Beach Police Department in 2006. That was the last time. The feds, as I said earlier, the feds had a list of 32 victims, and they did not indict Epstein on one single count of child abuse. And it's very obvious that Epstein, everything that he did had been covered up. And as I said earlier, the first known reports of Epstein, of victims going to the FBI, were the Farmer sisters went to the FBI in 1996. So Epstein had been covered up all those years, which is, and like with the Franklin scandal was a huge network. It was bigger than Epstein's. Wasn't as was around about half as long as Epstein's, but it was much bigger than Epstein. According to federal and state authorities, not a single child had been abused. That there wasn't a network. I mean, and that shows you. And then with the Epstein stuff, that all the stuff that went on, like the cover up in 1996, and then the feds covering it up with the 32 victims, it shows how much power had to be deployed to cover that up. And as I said earlier, the only two people that can tell a U.S. attorney to stand down are the attorney general and the president. So someone is, as I said earlier, someone is pulling strings at the apex of power to cover that type of.
So when whatchamacallit, when Lawrence King got busted, who was president then? That was
George Herbert Walker
That was
Bush.
And he said he was friends with Bush, right?
Yeah, he was friends with everybody.
Did he was there things about like the White House tours and like Bush having kids in his house or in the White House?
Well, Craig Spence, who we talked about earlier, the sociopath that lived in Washington, D.C., he took kids and male prostitutes on midnight tours of the White House.
What?
Yes.
And
he's getting hot dogs and pizzas to the White House.
That's
from Chicago.
And that has been corroborated.
Really?
Yes. Yeah.
Male prostitutes going to the White House.
Yeah.
That's nice.
This is all bad.
And at least one underage
what the fuck?
victim.
One?
At least one. Yeah. So
just hanging there, or like did they say like what? Like they were just like night out, like you check this out? Or do they imply?
I think Spence just wanted to show some people how much power he had.
Jesus, man.
After a night of partying or whatever they did, he said, well, I'm going to take you guys on a tour of the White House. And
that's pretty awesome.
No, like wouldn't there be like I guess the
there was no real ramifications
sometimes.
And George H.W. was just in there just
his nightcap
sawing logs.
Yeah.
Little did he know.
There's a little parade. That's a fucked up
That's
parade.
so fucking crazy.
And the Washington Times broke that story, and the Washington Times also broke stories about Spence's home being wired for audiovisual blackmail.
What being wired?
Spence's home being wired for audiovisual blackmail.
Okay. Gotcha.
So, and unfortunately, the Washington Times is owned by Reverend Moon of Unification Church fame. They've done some amazing reporting, but they're tainted. And then the Washington Post did everything it possibly could to cover up Spence's pedophile network.
Who owns the Washington Post?
At that point, it was Catherine Graham.
Okay.
And now son owns the Washington Post.
Oh, no.
Who's her son?
What's Bezos own?
I thought Bezos owned the Post.
He owns part of the Post.
Okay.
Yeah. And then before that, Warren Buffett had owned part of it.
Did you watch the show Succession?
I did.
What did you think about that in terms of like, because that's pretty much what most of the show is about, how people can just completely spin the media narrative and kind of just move politicians to their pleasure.
I didn't think I was going to like it, but I kind of got into it.
Yeah, it was a good show.
Yeah.
It just shows. And that's in a very fictitious sense.
Sure.
But I think it. All art reflects reality, and I think that show really shows that the reality of how easy it is to cover things up and to get away with unbelievable malfeasance.
Yeah.
And how many death threats have you received?
Yeah.
Because midway through this podcast, I was like, oh, well, we're going to get killed. We're definitely going to get killed.
I've only had one. And now I've had some very strange stuff happen to me. But especially with my phones.
Really?
But I've only had one death threat. Yeah.
What was the threat? Like knock it off or like?
There was, so it's kind of interesting.
Stop being a party pooper. We're having fun.
Okay. So earlier I talked about living on an Indian guru's ashram, and someone who lived there, we maintained a friendship over the years. and he lived in Omaha. And my first trip to Omaha, I knew that something had gone down in Omaha, but I didn't think it was, big and malignant like it was. I didn't think that it was an interstate pedophile network. I didn't think that Boys Town was involved because Lawrence King was plundering Boys Town for underage victims. Jesus. I knew something had gone down. So I originally went to Omaha very skeptical. And I told my buddy, Dirk, I said, I hadn't seen him for, I hadn't seen him for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. And I said, yeah, I want to go to Omaha. And he goes, well, why do you want to come to Omaha? And I said, well, I'm looking into this story. And, he was a little concerned about my mental health at that point.
Sure, yeah.
But so I stayed at his apartment, and then the Nebraska State Patrol started calling his apartment. This is 2002. I didn't even have a cell phone, and Nebraska State Patrol started calling his. Leaving messages on his answering machine.
Was this after you got pulled over with the Rusty guy or before?
This is long before.
Whoa.
This is 2 or 3 years before. So so there was a woman. I was sitting. Dirk was coming back from his work, and I was sitting watching the History Channel or something like that. And then I hear a knock on the door, and I go look through the hole, and it's this really freaky looking woman.
Ugh.
And she says, I've got a book for you. And okay, so by the time this happened, I'd interviewed a victim. I'd interviewed Rusty Nelson. I caught someone following me. I was like, DEFCON 4 at this point. And And my buddy Dirk was, he was getting, kind of uptight about it too, because I'd obviously kicked the hornet's nest. And so this woman said, I want to give you a book. And at this point, I did not want my fingerprints on that book, and I didn't want her fingerprints in my friend's apartment. Yeah. So I said, please leave. And she wouldn't leave. And I said, come on, just leave, and then, and then scary. And then I got her, and then she eventually left. And then my buddy Dirk came in with some groceries. We were going to cook dinner that night. And he goes, I saw this freaky woman. And I said, well, she's been, I've just been talking to her for about 5 or 10 minutes. And then, so Dirk is making dinner, and then she comes back. And then Dirk looks at her, I look at her, through the people. And I said, dude, we can't let her in this apartment. And we don't want her fingerprints in this apartment at all. We don't want her fingerprint on that book. So
what was the book? Could you say?
I didn't see it.
Say Cheese and Die by R.L. Stein.
So
goosebumps.
It is a very spooky.
Dude, that's terrifying.
So she decided to leave, but her parting shot was, you're in a great deal of danger. You're going to get killed. What? And now that really short-circuited not only me, but Dirk. Dirk realized, this is real. And so we had a very nice dinner that night, but we didn't get a lot of sleep.
That was the part of the book that I was going to sleep, and then that story is told, and I was like, that's very scary.
That's scary.
I know the look of a crazy, like, looking through a peephole and seeing a lady out there, like, Drew. Yeah. Like that type of.
They always stand like right up against the door. I had a crazy lady knock on my door. I think she was just genuinely just a crazy lady. And I opened the door and her face was right there. I'm like, ah.
Yeah, very scary.
Well, at that point, I'd gotten very cautious. And like I said, I didn't want my fingerprints or Dirk's finger. I didn't want so.
Good call.
But yeah, in an investigation like that, you've got to kind of think about, like, before I went and tried to get pictures with Rusty. I made a video of myself, and I said, this is what I'm going to do. if I get busted for these pictures, I'm in pursuit of this story. If I don't come back, we obviously got the pictures. So,
what do you do with that? Do you just like give it to your friends? And be like, hey.
Yeah, I give it to my. What I did is all my interviews, I put them on CDs. I gave them to everybody.
Gotcha.
And then all the documentation that I had, it's in 3 different areas.
The scary part about it has got to be that they don't really care who knows. You know what I mean? Like the way they did with Epstein. I mean, they blew up that guy's plane. Yeah. They killed Epstein in front of the entire country.
Oh, yeah.
Like it seems like they're really not worried about it. I think once they survive one news cycle, it's over. They're clear.
It's done. Yeah.
Yeah, I think with my situation, I was a freelance journalist, and I think that other journalists had looked into that and they put heat on him, and that was the end of it. And so they just thought that that'd kind of be the end of Nick Bryant. And I can remember I had a mentor. He's since died. He was a journalist, and we were walking through Washington Square Park, and I was looking up at the buildings for snipers. I mean, I left Nebraska very freaked out.
Yeah.
And, we sat down, and he was a mentor of mine. He was a great guy. I loved him deeply. And he goes, if you don't want to pursue this, I'll still respect you. And I thought about it, I said, I think I have to pursue this. I mean, I know about it. I got to do what I can to get it out into the world. So
and it's an undeniable fact that a ton of kids are sex trafficked. It's like, there's no this isn't like people like to lump this like, oh, this is all conspiracy stuff. It's like, well, there are kids getting sex trafficked. There's been big sex traffickers getting busted, and then it just goes away. So like you were saying, like the only people who can do that are, 2 people. That's like clearly something's amiss. How do you get kids? Or what's like this might sound funny, what's like practical advice to like make sure your kids don't get caught up in this stuff? Because they're saying now with like the internet, they can kind of just contact kids online and like they look for kids who are like slightly disheveled.
Well, it's the thing. I mean, if a kid's from a lower socioeconomic background, a dysfunctional background, they're prime.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do
for predators. I mean, and predators really know how to prey. I mean, guys like Lawrence King and Craig Spence and Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, those guys are predators par excellence. They know how to get children, and they obviously really don't have any legal problems. So retribution. So they can get kids and molest them with impunity.
Jesus Christ, that was the thing I was watching today. It was just about this one guy would go to like football games and just go to like a high school football game. Just look, like he saw a girl with like an ankle monitor, and he's like, perfect. She's clearly
I guess if you just see a girl without a dad, or parents,
just
it's like perfect.
And Epstein was also buying children in Eastern Europe too.
Oh man! So, what didn't the Satanist group weren't they like breeding? Allegedly, they were like breeding kids for like the purpose of selling them. The Finders. There was like some.
The Finders were. There was a telex about the Finders buying a kid.
Oh, okay.
In Hong Kong, and then there was also evidence that the Finders would respond to people that were looking for babysitters.
Oh
yeah. Oddly enough, if you look up the Finders, because when I was reading the book, I started trying to look up. There's almost nothing.
There's a great article.
Awfully hard to find.
Elizabeth Vos, VOS, wrote a really good article on the Finders. It's the most, it's the best rendition of the Finders that anybody's ever come up with. Yeah. And I did find one of those kids, and I got to the grandmother. I found the grandmother, and then the grandmother had taken on the Finders to get the kid. And the Finders had really subjected her to, a terror, just a lot of terror. And but she's hung in there. She wanted her grandchild out of that cult. And I asked if the kid was only 17 at that time or 16, and I asked if she would mind if I interviewed the kid, and she said that she didn't want me to interview him.
Gotcha.
So I just backed off.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So we're getting close to time here.
Yeah.
How about you got a book coming out? You said in July.
I do. I've got a book
You want to talk
coming
about
out.
that at all?
It's called the Truth About Watergate: A Tale of Extraordinary Lies and Liars. And what you'll see in this book is that the Watergate cover story is almost purely fabrications, and Woodward and Bernstein are pathological liars. I've got them nailed in so many lies. I mean, they even lie. I mean, they lie about important things, but like Bernstein's talking about, he's going out to talk to someone and he's in this storm. And then on that particular day, there's no storm. They're lying about inconsequential things like that. They're just telling lies. And Bernstein said that he was ducking a subpoena and hung out in a theater where he was watching Deep Throat. Well, actually, Deep Throat wasn't even shown, during that period in Washington, D.C. So there's so many lies. And Deep Throat, Woodward's, sagacious source. I really show how that's kind of impossible. Mark Felt, who was outed as Deep Throat after he was very suffering from dementia and wasn't quite there. And I do think that Mark Felt gave Woodward some information, but Mark Felt was living in, he got fired from the FBI, and supposedly Felt would go by Woodward's apartment, and if the flower pot was out, then that meant that Woodward wanted to contact him, and Woodward would take all these cabs and they'd meet in Virginia. And it's kind of funny because the real critical information that Deep Throat gave Woodward is when after Felt got fired from the FBI. So he's driving in from Alexandria, Virginia every day, looking up at the patio. But here's the kicker: Woodward's apartment faced a courtyard. I mean, you could not to see Woodward's apartment. You had to get out of your car and then walk 50 feet and look straight up. So, I mean, that's just one of many things.
So the whole, just like as a summary, Watergate was like, what was the thing you think they were covering up?
Watergate was, it was a silent coup. People, now Nixon, I don't dispute that the dude had some major psychiatric issues.
Sure.
But what Nixon was trying to do is he was opening up China for called rapprochement, diplomatic, and then he was doing strategic arm limitations with the Russians. He wanted to really scale back on nuclear weapons. And what happened there is, like, the jingos in the military and also in the CIA really, and Nixon was conducting these negotiations with a top secret communication system that the Navy had. It was called SD-1. So initially, the Joint Chiefs of Staff had an espionage ring against Nixon, and then the administration outed them, and then but then the CIA started to infiltrate his administration, the inner sanctums, because all those burglars that were busted at the Watergate, except for G. Gordon Liddy, well, he wasn't actually busted at the Watergate, but he was busted later on. They were all CIA.
Oh, fuck.
So, and Woodward has an extensive background in intelligence, and actually the special prosecutor that was able to get rid of Nixon, he has a background in a lot of connections to CIA. So
Gotcha.
The CIA was, wanted to get rid of Nixon, and it had some fortuitous things happen. And then, but Watergate was like a completely a botched job. I mean, those guys they were in the Watergate twice, and they should have been busted the first time, but the security guard was cognitively challenged. I mean, he just wasn't that bright. I mean, at one point, okay, so
Forrest Gump told him.
I mean, no. Forrest Gump made this guy look like Einstein.
Really?
I mean, so
or was he deep undercover?
He could have been.
He could have been the ultimate deep throat.
The Democratic National Committee was on the 8th floor of the Watergate, and the Federal Reserve was on the 6th floor. Now, someone had burgled the Federal Reserve a month earlier, but at one point, and this is mind-boggling, McCord, who was a CIA guy forever, led the burglars, who were all CIA assets, up to the signed in and went to, and this was around midnight, and went to the Federal Reserve. I mean, I've been burgled. And they could, and that security guard was too stupid to call the police.
Oh my
so
God.
they
were like, we got to do it again.
Yeah, so they had to do it. Yeah, so they had to do it again. And
That's the reason you're here, burglary.
Yeah, I mean,
All right, go ahead.
when you read the book, it's
God,
kind of mind-boggling what happened, what really happened with Watergate.
At least Nixon got off easy compared to JFK.
True.
Well,
It's kind of a nice. They toned it down a little. They were like, "We're just going to fake a thing. You'll get impeached. It's better than getting your head blown off during a parade."
Definitely.
Well, the thing about that is there'd been so much blowback with Kennedy and the Warren Commission. Like a majority of the Americans didn't believe the Warren Commission. I mean, the media has had all these years to work on them and brainwash them, but 60% still don't think that Oswald acted alone. So I think, and then you had the death of Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy. So I think had you not had those previous assassinations, the CIA probably would have assassinated Nixon. But this way, it was.
Gotcha.
It was a kinder, gentler.
It's almost like why
way to go.
Maxwell's still alive.
Yeah.
You know,
she died
there's
too.
no way
All
they can
right.
do that again, just like that.
I hope not.
It's like every other. I think they can do every other.
Yeah,
Like, all right, you
unless
live,
it's
you
the
die.
civil rights leaders, then it's
Oh, dude,
then they can do every single one.
They iced them pretty badly. Yeah, they had a nice little run of assassinations there for a while. And
Yeah,
I
they
guess
got
they got
greedy.
more
Yeah.
sophisticated. Like, I guess we could just make up terrible shit about these guys. And
Yeah.
a little easier.
Well, I think that's it, Nick.
Yeah.
That was awesome,
Dude, thank you
That
so
was
much.
awesome. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. And
Yeah, thanks for looking into all this stuff. It's pretty scary to do. You know,
yeah, you keep looking at it. What are you just trying to find the one
that
thing
crazy
that'll,
lady.
that'll get you?
I'd have been done, dude.
It's, I don't know. You know, it's once I was on this trajectory,
Mhm.
I wanted to see justice.
Yeah.
I've talked to so many victims. I've spoken at so many conferences. I've interacted with, so many victims. And I want to see them get justice if they possibly can.
Yeah, well, it's funny with the feminists too, because they talk about the patriarchy. And you're like, all right, here's a bunch of powerful men abusing children. And they're like, that's a conspiracy theory. And it's like, no, isn't that like your whole philosophy for how the world works? Like, no, that's conspiracy theory. It's like, no, it's there they are.
Yeah,
Lock 'em
that's
up.
them. Here's their names.
Yeah, because it's kids, man. It's little kids. It's like, and it's definitely happening. And it's, it's fucked up.
Yeah, it's had the media had any integrity whatsoever,
Mm-hmm.
Washington, D.C. would have been filled with mobs demanding justice. There was a similar situation in Belgium, and a couple 100,000 Belgians hit the streets.
Really?
Yeah, this was how long ago was that?
It was late 90s, I think.
Yeah, I remember there was a joke in a movie I heard about. In the movie In Bruges.
Oh,
he makes a joke about Belgium. That's the only thing I've ever heard about the Belgian pedophile thing.
it was Marc Dutroux was the guy that got caught. And, but yeah, that was at that point you had law enforcement coming out and saying this is a cover up.
Yeah.
Kind of like
What?
with what happened with Palm Beach Police Department and Epstein.
Yeah, he blew the whistle on it pretty. Yeah, good for him. And they still cover it up. Like, all right, next level.
I'm going to hit the bathroom.
Yeah. Well,
All right, well,
let's wrap it up.
thank
We're
you very
done.
much. And yes.
Yeah, thank you
goodbye.
so much.
All right, well, that was our interview with Nick Bryant.
Man.
And I don't know about you. I feel spooked and I'm ready for this definitely to get taken down
For
and
sure.
all of our money to be taken.
Possibly.
They're going to kill me with the heart attack gun.
You think so?
Yeah. I've been talking about being fat and doing coke.
They're
They're going to kill me with the heart attack gun.
The sonic wave.
You, You're jumping off a building.
I think they'll let me eat true, or they'll just like MK Ultra me, let me go crazy.
Yeah.
That they might be. It might be good to keep me
It'd be
around.
pretty easy to get rid of us.
Oh, dude, piece of cake.
Dude, all the knowledge we just acquired.
Also, I almost get rid of myself just like walking my dogs and like listening to my headphones. I almost get hit by a car like once a month.
Yeah, I'm gonna let the CIA off the hook here. I'm probably gonna have a heart attack. It probably wasn't them.
Just be
if
patient.
I do commit suicide, that was probably me. Look, I'm not saying I'm suicidal, but if I ever do it, I was probably pretty sad.
There's a greater chance of me killing myself in the CIA. Yeah, I can see that.
All right. That whole fucking thing was brought to you by Manscaped.
Yeah,
Good call to start sponsoring
hey,
today,
are you trying to start a honeypot and you want
Hey, are you tired of your kids having pubes? All right.
Do you want to
know
rise to the highest of all levels but don't want to grab underage girls? Grab a girl who's overage and shave her pubes with Manscaped.
Matt. All right. Today's podcast, we were brought to you. Look how giggly we are, dude.
I know.
Nick just left. Now we're all
We had to get all the
giggly,
giggles. We had to, dude. Me and Shane were buttoned up.
Save it for the Patreon, bro.
True.
All right.
We should do this at the very beginning of the podcast.
Look, we're brought to you by Manscaped.
Yes.
This is the beginning. All
Yeah,
right,
the
fine.
beginning.
No,
This beginning.
the beginning stinks. You don't want to open with ads.
It'll be a good open.
All right, fine. This is the beginning.
And we
Get
got to
ready.
do one of those things like, hey guys, today we talked to, you know what I mean?
Yeah, all right, we can do that.
Yeah. But first,
They're known for
pubes.
the best pube trimmer around, the Lawnmower 4.0.
Whoa.
Talk about how hard, scary, painful trimming your pubes is and how using Manscaped helps.
I mean, if you cut your balls, they do bleed forever.
It is a real negative experience. And Manscaped did send us a fucking package that does
True.
work.
I smell good now.
I smell good. I've been using the body wash they sent.
Yep.
Wow, I smell good. And girls can't get enough of it. Underage girls at sex parties. Manscaped now has been a great line of products in the all-new Ultra Premium collection. Go to manscaped.com for 20% off plus free shipping with the code DRENCHED. It all starts with a cologne-infused Ultra Premium body wash. That's what I use to attract perfectly of-age women.
Exactly, dude.
Loaded with aloe vera and sea salt, keeps your skin feeling clean and moisturized all day.
For sure.
And a 2-in-1 shampoo and conditioner that cleanses and nourishes in one step. Use it anywhere you got hair. Use it on your ass crack if you're a hairy wop.
Dude,
Matt?
Sorry.
And they've got aluminum-free deodorant. It dries clear. Have tattoos or dry skin? Hit your skin with the hydrating body moisturizer spray. Talk about a product they sent you that you like. I told you already I like the moisturizer.
Yeah.
So look. Get 20% off free shipping with the code DRENCHED at manscaped.com. That's 20% off free shipping at Manscaped and use the code DRENCHED when you buy Ultra Premium Collection from manscaped.com. For real, though, they sent me that package and it is very nice. It's nice to have a nice ball trimmer. You know which one I was using? One I stole from Phil.
Really?
A long time ago, and I've used it ever since.
I use my wife.
I think
Girls
he was-
always have some weird shit like that. The nose hair trimmer, that came
Nose
right
hair
on
trimmer
time.
is nice.
Bro, I'll never... Like that. That's the only thing that can make me trim my nose hairs.
Yeah.
They sent me a nose hair trimmer. I was like, oh, nice. And I just
It's a nice one.
got up in there. Dude, I was full Spyro the Dragon. I was like,
Yeah.
I had him coming out of every which way. So that was cool.
So that's our sponsor.
Yeah, trim your nose
Manscaped.
hairs, dude.
We were just kidding about the stuff up front, Manscaped.
Yeah.
Shawn, you have a show coming out Friday. Is it Friday that you have a show or is it Thursday?
Yeah, I have a show Friday
Oh,
at
nice.
Sesh Comedy.
Sesh Comedy.
It's called The Doghouse. Bees can't come anymore because he's doing Harrisburg with you.
Yeah.
But
There you
instead we
go.
have Column, so come see all of our friends in Column on my Instagram. And then The Stand on Wednesday.
Oh.
I have Drip. We got Nick Mullen on there, Shane Torres, our pal Andy Malfarina,
Yeah.
a bunch of
So
very
that's,
funny
that's
comedians.
Wednesday at the Stand?
That's Wednesday, April 6th at The Stand
Oh,
at
that's
7
going to be a
p.m.
good show. You get to see the Muldog.
Yeah, please come. All the
Um,
stuff's on my Instagram, so that'd be
the-
nice. Thank you.
7th, 8th, and 9th, I'll be at the West Palm Beach Improv. Palm Beach.
Whoa.
Palm Beach Improv.
Mar-a-Lago.
The 14th, 15th, and 16th, I'll be at Good Nights in Raleigh. 22nd, 23rd, a little Nashville Comedy Festival. The 28th, 29th, and 30th, I'll be in Indianapolis, Helium. Here's the ones I got to get out because I haven't done a good job of advertising these. May 6th, Friday, May 6th, I'll be at the Academy 2 in Manchester, UK. Sunday, May 8th, I'll be at the Wardrobe in Leeds, United Kingdom. Monday, May 9th, I'll be in Glasgow at Oran Moor. Thursday, May 12th, I'll be in Dublin, Ireland at Liberty Hall. Early show sold out, not a big deal.
Nice.
Thursday, May 12th, there'll be a late show, also at Liberty Hall in Dublin. Friday, May 13th, this is confusing for a lot of people. Friday, May 13th, I'll be at the Leicester Square Theater. That is sold out. That's at 7:30. Friday, then I'm going across town for a 9:30 show. Friday, May 13th, I'll be at Shepherd's Bush Empire Theater in London. And that's the first like theater I'm ever doing in my life.
Really?
It'll be in London.
Damn.
That'll be pretty sick.
That'd be awesome.
Shepherd's Bush Empire, May 13th. Please come to that, blokes.
Dude, you got to go full Peaky Blinder. Keep the razor blades in your hat and fucking.
The Peaky Blinder. You better come to my show, eh?
I'll be in Austin April 14th at Cap City Comedy Club. Magooby's Joke House, April 21st, Timonium, Maryland.
That's going to be lit.
That's going to be fun.
April 21st.
April 21st, right after 420, dude. I don't know if I'm
Is that a weekday or?
I believe it's a weekday.
I might do a little guest spot.
Dude, that would be so fun. I believe it's a.
Fuck, I'm in gay Nashville.
I think it's a weekday. I'm pretty sure it's a
I'm
weekday.
in Nashville that whole week.
And the big one, dude, the mother of all shows, Bananas Comedy Club.
Oh my God, Bananas
April
is sold
29th
out
and 30th. I don't know.
That's
I
got to
don't
be
think
sold
so.
out.
They would have told me.
That's
got
to be sold out.
April 29th and 30th, Bananas Comedy Club, Rutherford, New Jersey.
Rutherford. Yeah, how have you not
North
been able
Jersey.
to say Rutherford?
Is it Rutherford or Rutherford?
Rutherford.
Rutherford.
Yeah, it's Ruthford's.
First of all, Gonzaga's not even in the fucking tournament, you dickhead.
Yeah,
I was
no.
like telling my cousin, I was like, I got Gonzaga. He was
Well,
like,
they
"They're
lost
not in."
recently.
Shit.
They lost recently.
Yeah, they did win. When I told you they were winning, they
Really?
were. Yes, and Gonzaga.
Oh.
All right,
Dogs.
so we're
Yeah.
doing this before the episode?
No,
Whatever you
Yeah,
guys
put
want.
this at the end.
Put
This
it
is
at
at the
end.
end.
Put it at the end. Yeah,
Yeah.
put it at the end.
Thank
Hey,
you.
gang.
Thank you for watching our show.
Yeah.
Read the Franklin scandal, dude. That shit's scary.
Dude, I'm all over it.
It's spooky.
It's great.
All right, goodbye.
Farewell.